It is finally time! Welcome, friends and viewers of YouTube. Today is June 30th. Now, you may not know what June 30th necessarily means, but if you can see the screen in front of you, today is the yearly ban announcement for Standard in particular. They did mention, Wizards of the Coast mentioned in previous ban list articles that June 30th, which is, well, not specifically June 30th, but whenever the rotation happens, that once per year standard rotation window, that's the window they're going to use to affect Standard. Now, I actually uploaded a video not too long ago with my ban list predictions, so we'll have to see how much of that I got right. And one thing that I actually didn't mention in that previous ban list prediction video is this whole concept of once a year bannings. If you're sort of pigeonholing yourself into only allowing yourself to make changes to Standard once per year, you would kind of assume that they're going to make a lot of changes, because given the way the format has progressed over, the past 6 months or so with the rise of Red and Cory Steelcutter, I feel like they want to sort of have an opportunity for newer cards to make an impact. And the past couple of sets have not really done that. Granted, Tarkir Dragonstorm had Cory Steelcutter, but other than that, there's not really much else. And heaven forbid Aether Drift had anything outside of stock up. So you would kind of expect standard sets to have a bigger impact than just one card. So with all of that said, this is the once per year opportunity they have to make changes to Standard, and I'm expecting something pretty big. I will say I'm recording this at, what time is it? It is 11:06 a.m., 5 minutes after the list went live. I haven't seen anything, although I did get one card spoiled as I was clicking into the link and didn't zoom in enough, so I did see there was one card spoiled, but I think I saw multiple changes, so let's just get right into it. All right, ban list reaction live. We're just gonna go one by one, scroll very slowly. Standard. Cory Steelcutter is banned. This is the one that I got spoiled, so I'm not like, oh, Cory Steelcutter. Also, this was, I think, the easiest slam dunk out of basically any of the available options to get banned in Standard. I understand it's a new card, and there could be some arguments to let it simmer for a little bit longer, but for anybody who's played with and against this card in the Standard format over the past couple of months since it's been legal, this is maybe one of the best red cards ever printed. I don't think it's unfair to say that. This is like up in the category of Fable the Mirrorbreaker, and it's a lot more aggressive than Fable the Mirrorbreaker too. And not only that, it just warps the entire format around it, right? You have this feeling of removal spells feel a little bit worse because they're very easily able to grind through that with Cutter making tokens. So I think this one, to me at least, seemed pretty obvious. There was probably going to be an uproar if this card didn't get banned. So, we'll go into the details about their explanations and whatnot, but let's just get on to the next card. So Cory Steelcutter, banned. Is there any other changes? Oh, okay. So this is kind of interesting. Now, Abuos Awakening is banned. For people who are not familiar with Abuos Awakening, there it is on your screen. This is a card that is used to reanimate Omniscience. Now, it's kind of strange where there's a couple of weird things here. Now, first of all, I think I'm pretty happy that they're hitting the Omniscience deck, because this means that we're probably going to see even more changes. But the interesting thing to me about banning Abuos Awakening compared to something like Omniscience is two reasons. One, Omniscience is supposed to be in Standard, well, supposed to be indefinitely. It's in Foundations, which is legal for at a minimum of 5 years. And the issue with banning something like Abuos Awakening instead of Omniscience is you run into this problem where you have to be very restrictive and careful about cards that you print down the road that can reanimate stuff like Omniscience, because you've clearly identified a problem, right? If you're banning Abuos Awakening, you're saying, we don't want this to be a part of Standard. So interesting that they wouldn't hit the Omniscience. Maybe they'll mention that in sort of the description about, they talk about what, why they ban each individual card. But happy to see that one go. Should shake up the format quite a bit. Let's keep going. There we go. Monstrous Rage is banned. Now, in my ban list prediction video, I did bring this topic up about, if you want to hit red, would you rather hit something like Monstrous Rage or Manifold Mouse? And I was of the opinion that I do think it is better to ban something like Monstrous Rage. This card is, it was banned in Alchemy. Alchemy is a format where they're allowed to change cards, like tweak and turn cards and make them a little bit weaker. And even in that format, it still got banned. And the card is crazy. I mean, it in combination with Manifold Mouse is very good. And a lot of people are saying, well, you can still have the turn 1 Hardfire, turn 2 Manifold Mouse draws. There are still pump spells legal in the format, like Wild Ride, Turn Inside Out, things like that. But neither of those pump spells give trample, so it opens up chump blocking as an actual possibility, which was not the case before. Granted, if you can, offspring a Manifold Mouse, you get trample and double strike, but that's a 4-mana play, it's more investment. So I think that this one, to me, at least made the most sense, and I'm very curious to see what they say in the article. So this is sort of where these three, like hitting Omniscience, Mono Red, and Prowess, I think were, this is like the bare minimum that needed to happen. Curious to see if anything else happened. Let's take a look. Oh, okay. So, I actually was not convinced they were going to ban 2 different cards from Mono Red, but I'm very... I don't know. I mean, Hardfire Hero is an interesting one to ban over Manifold Mouse. I'm very curious to hear their explanation on that, because Hardfire Hero and Emberheart Challenger are significantly worse without Monstrous Rage and Manifold Mouse. So if you were going to hit 2 cards from Mono Red, little surprised that it wasn't Monstrous Rage and Manifold Mouse. But I mean, Hardfire Hero is banned. That is a huge, massive hit to the red decks. I mean, you probably could still play a mono red deck, but it's not going to be nearly as aggressive. And I think that's maybe their approach here, is they're banning 2 different 1-mana cards to sort of, basically extend the length of the average game of Standard. And I can appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, I didn't think they would go this far, but let's keep going. Anything else? Whoa. I mean, look, I said this earlier, and I wasn't sure that they were going to make this many changes, but I was of the opinion that they really needed to do this. Again, the fact that they sort of back themselves into this corner where they're only allowing one standard ban window per year, I thought that there was a chance that they would maybe do something like this, but I never thought they would pull the trigger on this many cards. Up the Beanstock is banned. Crazy. May not become a bit of as much of an issue once Leyline Binding and Zero rotate, and it is very unfortunate that the green-black graveyard decks, like the one that Jody Keith played at the Pro Tour, with like Diamond Weapon and Huskburster, that is an unfortunate casualty of the Up the Beanstalk ban, but I mean, it was probably primed to do well with stuff like Yuna and Overlords anyway, so not super unhappy to see it go. Oh my goodness. Okay, I kind of had a feeling like some of this would go, but I mean, I didn't know they would keep going. Oh my goodness. Hopeless Nightmare is banned. I mean, this one, I should have been hovering over the card images this whole time. This one is a big player for the Esper Pixie decks, and I think you can clearly tell that they're like, okay, well, if we're going to shake up the metagame this much, we can probably assume that Esper Pixie is going to be a tier 1 or tier, heaven forbid, tier 0 strategy. So just sort of nipping it in the... Oh. Okay, I spoiled myself a little bit on the next one. Jesus Christ. Okay, well, Hopeless Nightmare and This Town Ain't Big Enough, both banned. These were, pretty big fixtures of that Esper Pixie deck that I was talking about. This town quite good with like stuff like Vivi and Storm Chaser's talent. Anything else? I mean, okay, I was gonna say, my goodness. That is absurd. I mean, we kind of had a feeling that at least one thing from Prowess and Mono Red was going. And I'm very, very happy to see a list like this, because that means that they are willing to do what sort of needs to be done to, what's the best way to put this? Not like force rotate the format, but sort of like just weaken a lot of the top strategies, right? I guess you're not really weakening Esper Pixie by banning Nightmare in town. That deck is basically unplayable at this point. Up the Beantock, similar thing with, like, I don't think you can play the Golgari Graveyard decks without Beantock. Hero and Monstrous Rage banned. People will still try to play Mono Red. Cory Steel Cutter banned. I can't imagine you would want to play Prowess anymore. That was part of the biggest reason to play it. And then Abuos Awakening basically just kills the Omniscience deck. So you've removed Prowess, Omniscience, Domain, and Esper Pixie as options, and you've significantly weakened the Mono Red deck. Like, banning 2 different 1-mana cards is massive, because it actually, like, I feel like banning both Rage and Hero, well, I was initially skeptical at first. It sort of makes sense, because you want to the biggest thing is you want to try to increase the length of the average game that's played in Standard. So, my goodness, I did not think they would go this far, but bravo to WotC. Now let's take a look at other formats. I will say, not really been in touch with Pioneer recently, so I don't have as many thoughts on Pioneer. Okay, no changes. I've heard some people say that the red deck in Pioneer is a problem. They've, cited cards like, Monstrous Rage, Sunspine Links, that kind of stuff, but I just don't have as much exposure to Pioneer as of late, so yeah, Modern, no changes. We already knew that. They told us that before. Legacy, again, no changes. I'm not really familiar with the Legacy, Vintage, and Pauper formats. Same thing, again, with Pioneer. And then I play a good amount of Modern, even though I don't really play that much on stream anymore. But again, they did mention they would not make any changes to Modern due to it being in the middle of the... Alchemy. Okay, forgot about that. Alchemy, Cory Steel Cutter is suspended pending rebalance. Pioneer, Best of One, Chibalt's Trickery is banned. Historic Counterspell is unbanned. I did have some experience with Historic this past weekend, and that format is kind of a clown show. I played the Historic Qualifier, and I played against Soren 6 out of 6 rounds. So I guess Counterspell being unbanned maybe helps against Soren, kind of. Not really sure. My goodness. All right, let's get on to this article a little bit, because, we're already 13 minutes in, so I just kind of want to go over... We're only going to specifically talk about Standard, because really none of the other formats had changes to them. So I just want to see the card-by-card explanation. Okay, so today's announcement is our once-a-year early rotation window for Standard. Our goal with this window is to set the next rotation cycle up to be as fun as possible. And that is one very important thing to highlight here, to be as fun as possible. I think a lot of people, like, very specifically associate ban announcements. I can't speak today, I'm so excited. A lot of people associate ban announcements specifically with the win rate of individual decks and individual cards, and it seems to me, based on this information in front of us, that's not the only thing they're looking at. They're looking at how fun and enjoyable are the games, which I can appreciate that. We do this by saying an early goodbye to a number of cards that have proven their strength and made the format less fun, either by creating unhealthy play patterns or by restricting the viable deck building options available in the environment. Below, we'll discuss these bans and our reasoning behind them. Then we'll discuss the lessons learned from these cards for 3-year Standard. 7's a lot. Yep, definitely. Our last ban. I want to talk about card by card. The release of Tarkir Dragonstorm had a dramatic effect in the Standard metagame, propelling Izzet Prowess to the top of the metagame on the wings of Cory Steel Cutter. It was the deck to beat at the recent round of Standard Regional Championships and represented over 40% of the Standard metagame. Yep, we know that. It's clear that Izzet Prowess is having a negative effect in the Standard metagame. Its play rate numbers are substantially higher than we have seen in Standard in the recent past. Yep, the degree to which the deck is warping the rest of the metagame around it is crystal clear. And I think that's one of the more important things, where you see once you start seeing people playing a main deck Magebane Lizard, 4 temporary lockdowns, main deck High Noons, main deck Authority of the Consuls, like all of these cards that are frequently cited as very specific and niche sideboard cards, you're seeing 4 of these in, like, you know, almost every single main deck. That's when you know you have a bit of a problem. The deck has sort of warped the entire format to a point where not only can you not play specific strategies, but you also have to, like, change the way that you build your main deck substantially in order to combat something like Is It Prowess, which is a problem. Excellent card against Yep, they're citing Magebane Lizard. Cory Steelcutter is the obvious target from the Prowess deck for banning. It is quite simply too strong for the format, a card that's a little bit stronger than everything else. In addition to quickly rising to the top of the standard metagame, Cory Steelcutter also had a large impact on Modern, a format considerably more powerful than Standard. Another very good point. Cory Steelcutter, Is It Prowess in Modern, I think is like the 2nd or 3rd most popular deck, and that's a format where you can play with free spells. And it's, well, I mean, you know, obviously Cutter is better with free spells, but you get the point. Modern is significantly higher power level than Standard, and it's still good enough for that format. It also has the quality of being a challenging card to interact with profitably. Yep. That's kind of the whole point that I was making in my ban list prediction, is like, you can't, normally removal spells are good against Is It Prowess, but with Cutter, it just makes removal spells sort of feel meaningless. I had to make sure I was still recording here. This combination of sheer strength and resilience, like Cory Steelcutter, run rampant in Standard. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much it. For the sake of clarity and setting expectations, the banning of Cutter is the kind of action we would take in any of our banning windows. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the last ban announcement after Tarkir had come out? I don't remember on that. I'll have to, somebody can correct me in the comment section. But maybe it was just still too new. I think it was like a couple weeks after Tarkir, so it's possible. Standard metagame clearly meets a threshold for bans outside this once per year standard window. That is very good that they mentioned that. Now, it's very curious to see, like, you know, I wonder if it says meets our threshold for bans. Like, what is that number? You know, I would like maybe a little bit more transparency. Like, if a deck is 30%, 35%, 40% of the metagame, like, what exactly is that threshold of, you know, for dominance? You know, curious to see that, what those numbers look like. The release of Cory Steelcutter reshaped the landscape of Standard. It's challenging to predict what will happen to the metagame. We have concerns that the format may drift back to the format as it existed previously. To make sure the next Standard metagame is diverse and has room for exploration, we're banning 6 additional cards. It's so crazy to hear that, but a second most popular deck was Omniscience, 20% share of the metagame. Okay, curious to see what the reasoning is behind Awakening over Omniscience. I hope they talk about that. The Omniscience deck has existed as a part of the metagame for a while, but climbed in popularity due to be a major player after gaining new cards in Roiling Dragonstorm and Regent. Awakening always had the potential to create a deck like this, as 4 mana is cheaper than we normally allow non-creature reanimation effects to be, but we had hoped that turning what brings it back into a creature would allow ample counterplay. Not the case for Omniscience. Combo decks like Azorius Omniscience are something we want to exist in Standard, but when too strong, they warp the format around them and reduce the number of viable decks. Version of Omniscience has proved too powerful and consistent. For those reasons, Abuos Awakening is banned. Yeah, see, I'm a little disappointed in this paragraph. I mean, I'm happy that something from Omniscience is going. Don't get me wrong. I think that I agree with a lot of what they're saying here, where, you know, this version of Omniscience is too powerful, super consistent, turn 4 kills, hard to interact with sometimes once they, like, you know, if they go Awakening Omniscience, then cast the second Omniscience. But I'm very, very, you know, interested as to the thought process behind why they would ban Awakening over Omniscience. Again, as I said earlier, it just sort of limits design space in the future. You know, I mean, maybe they have no intention of printing 4 mana reanimate a non-creature permanent period anyways, as they clearly stated in the article, where that's sort of like below what they normally would want for, you know, for that type of effect. So I guess maybe that's fine. but I don't know. I mean, Omniscience is just like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really think Omniscience is ever used for good. Every single time that card has been in a deck, it's been in some sort of combination strategy. And I don't know. I'm just, even if maybe the thought process behind leaving Omniscience banned is like they think that maybe there's some sort of like weird fringe combo deck that's a little bit more at the appropriate power level compared to the Azorius Omniscience deck that's just turn 4ing every time. So maybe that's the idea, and I guess that kind of makes sense. So interesting there. Rage has been powering red aggressive decks in Standard since its release in Wilds. It is one of the strongest and most efficient combat tricks to ever have been printed. That's what we've been saying. We've enjoyed having a combat trick be a strong Standard card, but it's clear that Rage has overstayed its welcome. It has enabled combo-style aggro decks more than we would like and has played a large role in lowering the fundamental turn in Standard and putting players under too much pressure too quickly. Yep, for these reasons, Monstrous Rage is banned. Okay, makes sense. Hero, okay, here's an interesting one. Hero versus Manifold Mouse. Hero has been another key piece of red aggressive deck's strength throughout the last year of Standard. The curve of Hero into Manifold puts the opponent under pressure immediately and forces decks to have ample interaction for the early turns. Additionally, Hero's Dies trigger gives the red deck significant resiliency to many kinds of removal. Its strength has shifted the format towards decks that can interact starting on turn 1 or 2, or decks that can leverage Lockdown as powerful counterplay. We want red aggressive strategies to be a viable option in Standard, but Hero has proven to have too much explosive power combined with too much resiliency. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, right? I guess I never thought about, really never thought about Hero versus, banning Hero over Manifold Mouse. I always thought the problematic cards were either Manifold or Challenger. But the banning of Hero is interesting because now you, again, as I stated earlier, you've removed two one mana cards from the red deck, significantly decreasing its overall speed, which I think in turn is probably good for the health of the format. It just, I don't know, I feel like Manifold Mouse is a much less interesting card, where it's very, very obvious where you just want to put a pump spell with Manifold Mouse, because you can just go Offspring it, give something double strike trample, pump it, go from there. So I don't know, it seems like Manifold Mouse is a little less interesting, and Heartfire, there's as long as you're removing the Monstrous Rage, I don't know. I'm very, very curious on that specific. Okay, well, here we go. We discussed banning only Hero or Rage, but ultimately decided that banning both was the correct course of action. The two cards are both independently strong, and leaving either alone would make it likely that aggressive decks in the format would still be combo style with consistent explosive starts and a lot of burst damage potential. Again, the thing is, though, you can still have combo starts, combo centric or in the combo style aggro starts or whatever. Words are tough today. There's a lot going through my head. You can still have those starts with Manifold Mouse and other pump spells. It's just they're not guaranteed to always have trample that early on, because you have to wait until you offspring the Manifold Mouse to get both double strike and trample. A Beantock, again, kind of a surprise. Beantock is no stranger to the ban list, having been banned in Modern since 23. At this point, it's been clearly cemented as a best-in-class source of card advantage for slower decks. It shares Cutter's quality of being challenging to interact with profitably. Again, as somebody who has played against a lot of Up the Beantock in Standard in my lifetime, every single time they play it on turn 2 and you have to use something like a Get Lost or a Tear Asunder, it just feels so bad because you're down a card. It's not a good feeling. So I can appreciate that. Decks powered up by Beantock are hard for many types of strategies to adapt to, which eliminates them from the metagame. Yep. Deck building puzzle of Up the Beantock has been solved so many times that we expect it to be more monotonous than engaging as more cost reduction cards. Yeah, and that's another big thing about Beantock, right? Where Beantock was maybe at an appropriate power level prior to the release of the Overlords, right? The Overlords are super interesting designs. They're really cool. There's a lot of interesting things and play patterns that happen with the Overlords. The reason that they're so messed up is because of the interaction with Up the Beanstalk. And they don't want to, again, sort of pigeonhole themselves into, future design processes where they feel sort of obligated to not print any card that has any sort of cost reduction that works with Beanstalk. So I can appreciate that, and I'm glad they mentioned that. Yep, Beanstalk is banned. Pixie. So interesting, they decided to remove Nightmare and Town. Let's talk about this. Self-bounce decks have shifted a lot as the format has progressed. Small, powerful core constant between its iterations. Nightmare is a key piece of that core, serving the role of a 1-mana trinket that is powerful to cast many times in a game. The pattern of constant discarded forces is among the least fun elements of the deck. True. And shrinks the game in a way that makes it hard to come back from once the self-bound deck gets going. In addition, Nightmare provides the self-bounce decks with both interaction and damage, allowing the deck to position itself as a disruptive aggressive deck. I think that's part of what makes this card so messed up in combination with all the ways to bounce it, is you're not only depleting your opponent's resources, which is what a mid-range deck wants to do anyways, so frequently, like Hopeless Nightmare plus Pixie allows you to race decks that you would likely not be able to race otherwise. And it's just, the combination of that is just so good. And again, it's not like Hopeless Nightmare is a big problem in the metagame right now. What they're doing, and again, something that I very, very much appreciate, is they are addressing stuff in advance, right? Rather than say, okay, we're going to get rid of Prowess, we're going to get rid of Mono Red, see how the format shakes out. We know how it's going to shake out. Everybody's just going to go back to playing Esper Pixie, Up the Beanstalk, so on and so forth. So addressing an Omniscience, addressing those problems in advance, sort of as a prediction to know what people are going to be doing, I think is a really good approach, and I can very, very much appreciate that. Now, do you need to ban Hopeless Nightmare and Town? Not sure. That's where, Okay, this Town Ain't Big Enough has seen play in many different standard decks. It's almost always sees play along Talent, a 2-card package that has proven itself in a variety of shells. Most recently, this package played a role in the Is It Prowess deck as a key player in versions of the self-bounce synergy decks that incorporated blue. A Town Ain't Big Enough makes the format less fun through its unique ability to interact with any permanent base strategy while still advancing its wielders' game plan. While not a huge share of its overall power, the Loop Battalion is particularly frustrating and adds a threat of an endgame lockout to many matchups, making games less fun. Interesting. I mean, they did shout out Stormchaser's talent a little bit, and I feel like if you're gonna ban Nightmare, I don't necessarily know if you need to hit This Town Ain't Big Enough as well. But again, they're sort of like doing this thing where maybe This Town Ain't Big Enough plus Talent makes something like Cauldron plus VV too good, because we saw a couple decks of the PT that were playing Cauldron VV that weren't playing Core Steel or Monstrous Rage or any of those kind of red aggressive cards, more combo focused. Those decks did rely on This Town Ain't Big Enough Talent to sort of make sure it can keep going. I guess the PV version didn't, but the one that Peta Scythian did. So again, sort of like a advance, hit in advance, which again sort of makes sense. But yeah, I don't know. This one is a little perplexing to me. If you're already going to ban Nightmare, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you guys think they needed to ban both Town and Nightmare? I don't know. It's been a little over 2 years since we announced the shift to 3-year standard. With every set we release, we learn more about how to adapt our design heuristics to this new model for standard. This set of bans is emblematic of 2 key learnings we'll be carrying forward into the future. First, with larger card pool of 3-year standard, we need to be more precise with our 1-mana cards and our cards that synergize with 1-mana cards. So, like, when you have a larger card pool, it's more likely for something like Cutter to be broken because there's just an overabundance of cantrips with Sleight of Hand, Opt, and all these kinds of things. 3 of the cards banned today cost 1 mana. True! And Cory Still Cutter asks to be played alongside the cheapest cards available. Potential for 1-mana cards to define a format grows as the card pool increases. And we've learned that going to 3-year standard is a larger step in that direction than we had first believed. More fun when the stars of the games often cost more than 1 or even 2 mana. So going back to mid-range, I mean, look, if we just go back to a time where Jund is the best deck, then I'm in. Scrutinize and be careful with the rate of cards that are challenging to interact with favorably with the increased power level of decks in the larger format that is 3-year standard. Decks are capable of turning a small advantage into a snowball that ends the game. Strong cards that leave resources behind when dealt with, like Cutter and Beanstock, reliably create that first small advantage. Identifying these cards and evaluating their strength in the context of their interactional requirements is a task that play design is incorporating into our process going forward. One last announcement. Considering our next standard rotation won't be until early 2027, we'll be having 2 of our early rotation standard banning windows before the next standard rotation. You can expect one of those windows in about 18 months right before rotation as usual. The other one will be in roughly 9 months around the midway point, but we haven't decided on an exact date yet. Okay, interesting. Yeah, because for those of you who don't know, the next rotation is actually not happening, as they said here, until early 2027, because they're switching from fall rotation to beginning of year. So it's end of June right now. We're not going to have one until January 2027. So as they said, about 18 months. And that's too long of a window for them. So they're going to do 9 and then 9, which kind of makes sense. I'm already 31 minutes into this recording after editor cuts out a little bit, maybe like 25. So we're not going to take a look at Pioneer or the other formats. If you guys want to hear my changes, I'll be talking about these on the live stream. So definitely go check out the Twitch. But I think for the most part, there's enough to talk about here. I'm going to be honest with you. It's been a long time since we've seen a ban list like this, a ban list this impactful. And, I woke up this morning and I was a little I was scared. I just wasn't sure if they were willing to do what needs to be done to sort of advance standard past the point where it needs to be. And I'm very, very excited for the future. We're going to be doing a lot of post-ban standard content over the next month. I do plan on doing some post-rotation stuff a little bit early, so like decks that can survive rotation. So be on the lookout for that this month. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. What did you guys think of this ban list? Are you excited? Are you sad? 07s for Cory Steelcutter, and I will see you guys in the next one.